Hi, my name is Dana Slayton. I'm from Richmond, Virginia in the United States of America, and I am a teacher here at the American Institute. I'm really interested in language learning and specifically Arabic and Arabic dialects, but my fun fact, I guess, is that I collect weird socks. I have a kind of innumerable collection of odd socks with odd designs on them. I have a bunch at home that have toast and eggs on them. And I have, some that just have, stripes, and it's my thing. I like weird socks. So I think something that makes my classes really interesting is that there's always an element of cultural exchange in every class, because I am obviously trying to teach English in, its cultural context, in, the culture that I learned as I was growing up. But at the same time, my students are always so excited to share parts of their culture, of Algerian culture, with me. So in all of our discussions, we're talking about something happens the way like this in the U.S., but in Algeria, how does it work? And comparing and contrasting. They're learning from me, so that makes makes my heart happy, and it makes every class really fun. I also think that something that makes our discussions really interesting is that I'm very interested in helping my students express their unique opinions. All of our classes are centered on questions that don't have a right or a wrong answer. I never, am asking my students something that I, expect them to say one thing or another. What I'm trying to do is always get their opinions and kind of understand, why they think the way that they do, and help them, have those discussions really with one another, which is great. I think that, conversation can get kind of boring if there's one right answer to every question. So I'm always asking my students why, I'm always asking them so what, I'm always asking them like what, give me examples, because I'm really interested in helping them get to a point where they can express themselves fully and authentically on a wide variety of topics. So something really funny that happened in class was I actually hosted with my students one day a panel of Americans. So I called basically several of my friends from the US and Skyped them into class and had my students do an activity asking them different questions. And after the activity, I brought everybody back together and I debriefed, and I said, was there something that happened in this conversation that surprised you? And one of my students raised his hand and he said the most surprising thing was that one of the panelists got up and turned her fan on during the discussion. And he said that was surprising because it's winter and you shouldn't turn your fan on or you'll get sick. And I thought that was just, it's a very cultural thing here in Algeria to not want fans on you when it's cold outside, and to not drink cold things when it's cold outside. And we don't have anything like that in the US. I thought it was really funny. We all kind of laughed at that. And my students, we'd already had a discussion at that point. We also did a role play where students were pretending to be doctors and some were pretending to be patients. And all of the doctors, every single one of them, asked their patients who came in sick. They had gone outside without a hat on recently, and that was why they had caught a cold or caught the flu, which again is a very cultural thing, and just it cracks me up because it's tough. There were a lot of things that came up in that role play where students would be saying, "Did the wind hit you?" to patients, or "Oh, I think the wind hit you." And that's obviously ضربك الريح, which is a very common expression in Darja. At the American Institute, we use the communicative approach, which is the approach that I was trained in when I was learning how to teach. And it's very effective because it really puts the kind of focus on the students and how much language they're using. So I think generally speaking, I take that approach. I'm always trying to maintain an 80-20 ratio in my classroom. And what I mean by that is I want students producing 80% of the time and me producing no more than 20%. And that's just to make sure that, because really it's not about me in my classroom, it's about you, the student. It's about your learning. That's kind of general though. I think that most teachers at the Institute are, kind of thinking in a similar way. Uniquely to me, I actually learned, my very first teaching experiences were teaching kids. And when I was working with children, I, was kind of forced to, because of the way kids are, use a ton of games in my approach, lots of language games, lots of, puzzles, lots of problem solving. And that is actually kind of carried over even to adults. So obviously different kinds of games that we're using. Pretty much every class I try to, I introduce, whether it's vocabulary or grammar or something, I'll introduce the topic. And then early on, before we get into, real world practice and into, deep discussions and into, role plays, stuff that's really, more independent, I always, try to include an element of competition to kind of get through the drill repetition part of language learning, because I think that it is important. You need a lot of repetition to master any skill in any language. And an element of that is always going to be boring if you're doing it on worksheets, if you're doing it in writing exercises that you take home. So what I try and do is incorporate that kind of that repetition that's required to master. I do this a lot with grammar, because I think grammar can be really, really tedious if you don't do it right. But instead of using worksheets or using straight up repetitive drills, I introduce an element of competition whenever I introduce a new topic. So I will play a game. Whether that's, we did Family Feud once, that was really fun. And different kinds of like group scavenger hunts for different, vocabulary or grammar. And then, moving into teaching adults is that I found that in games, whether you're, a kid and you're playing basketball because you have a ton of energy, or whether you're an adult playing Family Feud, are a way to keep everybody engaged and to, get the kind of early on repetition that you need in order to master a skill in a language. Registrations are now open for the winter session at the American Institute, so go online today, take your level test, and please join us here. I'm so excited to meet all of you, and I'm really excited for the next session.